The Dark Waters channel is for entertainment purposes only. Although information in these stories can be traced back to relevant and true sources, Dark Waters strongly discourages its viewers, listeners, and subscribers from visiting the site of incidents and encounters discussed or revealed on the show. In other words, we will not be held responsible if you are attacked by a dogman, molested by a bigfoot, bitten by vampires, chased by chupacabras, abducted by aliens, accosted by the men in black, investigated or arrested by the local law enforcement, CIA, FBI, NSA, EPA, BLM, or another alphabet group, whether on U.S. soil or abroad. Thank you for tuning in, and enjoy the show.
I've been a realtor for the past 15 years. Got my start in San Diego. Made some money. After I made my goal of $3 million, my wife and I retired to a small town, 150 miles away from the U.S.-Mexican border. But I couldn't just give up my love of real estate. So I continued to take listings and sell properties. The only difference was that in this area, there were no beaches or high-rises. Here, there were nothing but broad swaths of land. And selling ranches is the name of the game. It took a while for me to get my first listing. I was a newbie in the area and people around here are not so trusting. But after 4 months of hanging out and a few political donations, I got my first listing, a 30-acre ranch that was bank-owned. Truthfully, I didn't need the money. I just loved the rush of working the deals. So when I got the information on this property, I was surprised. The place was damn near brand new. At least the house, I mean. It was built 5 years ago, and the property went into foreclosure 23 months after the permanent loan was put in place. So I'm thinking to myself, man, this should be an easy sale. And I decided to head up to the property to lay my eyes on it. I need to visualize myself selling this place. In order to get to the actual house itself, you had to turn off the highway onto this dirt road and travel a little less than a mile to get to the front gates. While on that dirt road, I realized that whoever built this house was a serious recluse. I mean, they must have wanted privacy. One of those off-the-grid types. There was no way I would have spent the type of money they did to live in such a desolate place. When I arrived at the front gate, I had to hop out and unlock it. This gate was massive, 9 feet tall, made of steel, and was beautiful. This family spared absolutely no expense on this house or this property. From the gate, I could see the house about 250 yards away. I drove right up to it, pulling up damn near at the front door. Typically, I do a walk around the property and take measurements. But there was a recent appraisal on a bank package, so luckily all I had to do was just go inside and see it for myself. Just as I was putting the key in the door, I heard what sounded like another vehicle coming up the road. Remember I told you about how desolate this place was? So I knew the only way somebody was coming down this road was they were headed to the property. I finally was able to see the vehicle. It was a cop car. The vehicle pulled in the gate, and it's this female officer. She parks, exits the vehicle, starts eyeballing my real estate sign on the side of my car, then starts to ask me what I'm up to. To be honest with you, this was a tense moment, because she had her hand on a weapon the whole time. It took a while for her to relax. Then she started telling me about the place. She said it was owned by a man named Kevin Shields and his family. They built the place as an off-grid location. Then she goes on to tell me about the underground bunkers and all kind of other little crap that's associated with this property. It was during this conversation that I learned that Mr. Shields died from some kind of wild animal attack. He tried driving himself to the hospital and had a wreck on the roadway, flipping his vehicle over and dying. Then she goes on to tell me good luck with selling the place and explains how there's lots of weird things that happen in the area. People are always reporting strange lights in the sky, hearing noises that sound like broken tornado sirens, and about these very large wolves. Diana, the officer, goes on to tell me that she was called out to the property one night when Mr. Shields was away on business. His wife and older sons were home alone. She said that when she arrived, they told her they thought a person was stalking the house, but whoever it was had run off. So she drove around the property in her vehicle to take a look around. And that's when she saw this huge wolf on all fours, walking a dried up creek bed that runs along the west side of the property. She said other officers had been called out as well and witnessed these same large wolves. At this point in time, I'm starting to get freaked out, and I want to change the subject. So I asked her if she wouldn't mind joining me as I did a walk around through the house. As I walked into the house, I realized that it was still furnished. I mean, this family clearly had just picked up and left in a hurry. There were still plates and dishes in the cabinets. And Diane, she looked disturbed as she walked around inside the house. At that point, I started getting the feeling there was way more to the story than I was being told. 20 or 30 minutes had passed, and then she said something real freaky. She said, "We need to be out of here by dark." And that's when I noticed this panicked look on her face. So I took her advice, and we left. The property sat on the market for 3 months before I got one phone call. And this call was from a man out of Texas. And this guy was weird. He was an oil man. Said he needed a place to prepare for the end of days. I mean, he seemed like a real smart fellow. But he thought the apocalypse was coming like next week. 2 days later, I found myself out at the property with this guy we'll call Big Tex. Now, normally, I like to show properties in the morning time. But this particular case, we were forced to do it around 4 p.m. because he came into town late. By 5:30, we had gotten through the house itself, and he still wanted to see the bunker and food storage area, and the barn that was towards the back of the property. I tried my best to get him to agree to start again in the morning, but he had plans to get back on a plane that night. Now, this property has no utilities turned on, so when the sun went down, we were just working with the headlights from our car and handheld flashlights. But luckily the sky was clear, and the moon provided good light. So we headed into the bunker and walked around a bit and then came out. I started getting that itchy feeling, like I can get this deal closed. So we were standing right in the front of my car. I had the contract in my hand, $2.5 million at 6%. I'm talking about $150,000. If I can get Big Tex to sign on a dotted line, I get that money. And just as I handed him the pen, I hear this growl. I mean, this thing was loud and deep. Tex looks at me and said, "What the was that?" Now, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, Diana was serious about these wolves. They got wolves out here. Then it growls again, but this time, the sound is coming from directly behind the vehicle. Tex and I jump in the vehicle and I start to pull off. And by the time I made a complete U-turn and headed back towards the front gate, Tex has damn near jumped out of the front seat of the car and into the back seat. Now, I didn't see anything at that moment, but based on his reaction, I floored it, getting up to about 55 miles an hour, headed back to the front gate. When I arrived at the gate, Tex's upper body was in the back seat and his feet and legs were still in the front seat, and he was screaming. I hopped out of the car and swung the left side of the gate open, and when I turned around, that's when I first laid my eyes on these creatures. Back about 150 yards away and moving towards us was what looked like an animal running on 2 legs. This motion was fluid. It wasn't labored at all. And this thing had a spring to its step, kind of like it was bouncing. For a few seconds I watched as this thing bounced back and forth, moving in my direction. Then I hopped back in the car and drove off, damn near ripping my bumper off as I hit the gate. Once we hit the highway, I found the gas station and pulled over. And I asked Tex if he was alright. But the look on this man's face let me know 2 things. Number 1, I wasn't getting this commission. And then he saw something so bad that it probably was going to scar him for the rest of his life. After a few seconds of silence, Tex told me that as I was turning the car, he looked out of the passenger side window, trying to see what made the noise. And this creature he describes as a giant wolf had his face pressed right up against the glass. And it moved as the vehicle turned and kept pace. He was locked eye to eye with this thing for the entire time. He said the eyes were this yellow color, with the largest black pupils he'd ever seen. And as it bared its teeth, its nose and snout wrinkled and saliva dripped from its mouth. He demanded I take him back to the hotel. I absolutely knew there was no way I was going to be able to sell this property to him now. I showed it several other times after that, and made sure that I did it in the daytime, and I've never seen those creatures again. However, another realtor went out to the property at night, against my advice. Kelly is a young, ambitious woman. Dare I say, she's a true country girl who wants to be like folks from the city. Our beef started when she tried to backdoor me with the bank and get the listing once it expired. Now, if you guys remember, I told you about this rush that I would get from doing real estate deals. Well, this is what I was talking about. All-out warfare, combat, protecting what's yours. Even though in this case this property was infested with walking wolves, I wasn't letting Kelly take the damn thing from me. Turns out, she wasn't able to get the listing. But what she did get was approval to do an open house. For those of you who don't know what open house is, imagine a party with lavish food and great drinks, all for the single purpose of selling the house. With this move, Kelly got her foot in the door, but she was trying to jam a damn arm in as well. And in true fashion, Kelly calls me to gloat about it. Did Robert from the bank inform you that we're having an open house at the property, she said. I felt my blood pressure rising as she talked, and I played it cool, responding, congratulations, heaven knows it's a big deal for a young upstart realtor like you. Yeah, I know. I know how to verbally punch back. But in my head, I was thinking, I hate you. That's when she tells me she's turning utilities back on and gonna have a nighttime open house. I couldn't help but smile. Started spinning in my office chair. Really? That's going to be amazing. Please be sure to send me an invite to this. And that's how that conversation ended. A day later, I'm at the coffee shop and I bump into Diane, a police officer. And she asks me why I'm having a party at the Shields' house. I told her, Diane, I have nothing to do with it. It's another realtor. She looked pretty upset and said, they are doing it at night. Why at night? Did you tell them about what happens there at night? Honestly, at that point, I had said nothing to Kelly. I was pissed. I warned her to fail. But Diane managed to make me feel guilty. After all, she really was a good person, and she insisted that I warn them. The open house was set for a Saturday night, and it was Monday. I called her that evening, and then I called her Tuesday morning. Then I called her Tuesday night. Finally, she answered the phone on Wednesday morning, and I think she was playing games, ignoring me, because when I finally got on the phone, she had a bit of attitude. Kelly, I need you to reconsider doing this event at night. How about we move it to the daytime? And that's when it's completely flipped out on me. You just don't want to see me succeed. Don't worry, you'll still get your 3% commission when I do what you couldn't do, make a sale on this house. I was silent for a moment. Now, I knew we had tension between the two of us, but her words were filled with venom. I mean, this woman really hated me. And for what? I didn't know. This was bigger than just competition. This was personal. So I turned around and made it personal. Listen, you little country, backwood, pencil skirt wearing whore. I'm trying to help you. The property is not safe at night. And if you don't believe me, ask Diana, the police officer. She'll tell you. As for my commission, the bank had the property on their books before I even moved here. If you were any kind of saleswoman, you would have known how to find it and had it sold before I even moved into town. You are not on my level, and not even in my league. You're not even on the same planet as me. I'm a Martian. You're a cave woman, scared, trapped in a cave because you're afraid of your own shadow. Yeah, I spazzed out on her just like that, and it felt good. And then I hung up the phone. Thursday, I see Diane again, and we're having coffee. I tell her, look, I did my best to warn Kelly, and I would be at the property all day. By nightfall, I was leaving, and Diane volunteered to go to the property with me. She said she was off duty that day, and when Saturday came, I met her at the coffee shop, and we headed to the property. When we arrived, I quickly realized that Kelly had went way overboard with this whole damn party thing. When we pulled into the gates, there were catering trucks, flower trucks, a temporary generator, an outdoor movie screen. She went all out trying to get this sale. And I must admit I was impressed, but none of that was going to get me to stay at this property until after dark. When we entered the house, it was just a bustling with people, setting up flowers, cleaning crews, mopping and dusting. She even baked cookies to make the house smell like home. Kelly was doing her thing. It was hard for me to admit it. But if people showed up and things went well, we both were going to make some money. I pushed around and found Kelly upstairs on the balcony in the master bedroom. And we locked eyes for a moment. She looked dazed and confused. Like her mind was somewhere else. That's when she looked at me and said, you think I went too far? What if no one shows up? I just spent $12,000. She was worried about the money, and I could understand that. I had been there before. Without thinking, I can't even explain why I did it. I just blurted out, I'll split the cost with you. Right after I said it, I realized it was a moment of weakness, and I thought to myself, what am I doing? That's when Kelly smiled and apologized for the arguments we've had over the past couple of days. And just when we were making up, Diane walks in, making this awful, awkward entrance, tripping her way into the doorway. But she went straight to it. Kelly, I'm a local officer. Are you aware this place is dangerous at night? Why are you doing this? That's when Kelly looked at me and said, are you serious? I thought you were just being a hater. From there, I went on to tell Kelly my experience, and Diane shared hers. Wasn't sure it was the fact that Kelly had invested so much money into this event, or she was just a skeptic, but she didn't listen. In 2 hours, guests would be arriving. It was kind of late to turn back now. So we moved off into the house, and Kelly disappeared among a crowd of people working and cleaning. The very first guest arrived at 4:30 and was greeted with champagne and began to walk around the property. By 5:45, there were 45 people walking around. The sun was about to set, so I headed out to my car. only to discover that I had been blocked in. And by blocked in, I don't mean like one car had me hemmed in. All the cars in front of the property had me blocked in. Diana, who was clearly smarter than me, had parked on the side of the house. So I went inside and offered to trade cards with her so I can get the hell out of there. She just laughed at me and said, "You're going to stick this out with me, buddy. Put your big boy drawers on and let's see what happens." So the sun sets, and things are actually going very well. The generator kicked in, and the property was well lit. I felt safe. In fact, I felt so safe that I started trying to help sell the property. That's when I ran into Robert, the gentleman who runs the foreclosure department at the bank. Now, for some reason, Robert was nervous. He was sweating and looking around. He was drinking like a sailor. Robert cornered me and asked, "You think you guys gonna get this property sold today?" And during this conversation is when I discovered that the bank actually fronted the money for this event, not Kelly herself, the dirty heifer. But anyway, he seemed so nervous, I knew something was wrong. So I decided to ask him straight up, "Have you seen the wolves on this property?" That's when his eyes got big. "Wolves? No, I ain't seen no wolves. But I've been here before, and I've heard the sirens and seen the lights." So I pulled him into the bathroom, and I asked, "What's the deal with this place, Bob? What are you not telling me?" That's when Bob began to spill the beans. He said, "It's Navajo lands. Navajo Indian lands. The bankers owned this property for years. Our founders took it from them. And the back 10 acres were their burial grounds with mounds." All I could think was, "You disrespectful mother." Talk about pissed off. I went to locate Diane. I wanted to tell her about this new piece of information, but she was nowhere to be found. That's when you started to hear the sound coming from outside. And this shit was creepy. Walking out of the front door, the sound was coming from the sky. And at first, I thought I was going crazy, figuring I was the only person hearing this. But when other people came outside and started to join me on the porch looking up at the night sky, it was clear that everyone was hearing this. There were no clouds in the night sky, and looking around, there was nothing to indicate where the noise was coming from. Just as suddenly as the sound started, it stopped. A few people took that opportunity to leave, but most of them just went back inside. So I went back to searching for Diana. When I found her, she was in the master bedroom on the balcony. "What's wrong?" I asked. She had her back turned to me, staring at the back of the property. "Just look," she said. Towards the back of the property, I could see movement. "They're coming in," she said. "They're coming in." For me, there was no need for an explanation. I could see it with my own two eyes. It looked like animals on all fours, 5 of them to be exact. They were moving slowly, hiding behind a brush, taking cover. Stalking is what they were doing. They were stalking to get closer to the house. Now, at this point, I have to say, I ain't nobody's hero. In fact, I'm a bit of an but so judge me how you choose to, but I needed to get out of the situation. I remember Kelly had left her keys in the master bathroom on the vanity. I noticed it early while she was talking that day. So I took him and head downstairs to the front door. Bob grabbed me by the shoulder and stopped me right about 10 feet away from the door and said if I can get this place sold, he would up the commission to 12%. If not, they were going to have to donate the land. For a second, I started to punch him in his face. He knew all this was going on his property, and he still let me come up here anyway. And that's when it went crazy. The power went out. From upstairs, you heard 2 gunshots, and the damn siren sounds all returned at once. I was pushed out of the front door by people trying to exit the house, and I rolled down the steps, and panic set in. People were jumping over cars, falling over each other, trampling people. When I recovered from my fall, I made a beeline for the side of the house where Kelly parked her car. Got in, cranked it up, and when the lights came on, 2 of these wolves were standing right by the power generator. I may have possibly damaged a few vehicles getting out of there, and I possibly might have bumped a person, 2 or 3, or maybe 4 on my way to the front gate. But I got out of there. Hours later, I got a call from Diana. She was worried and said she searched everywhere for me. Diana explained that it seemed as if the wolves didn't want to harm anyone. They just wanted to run everybody away from the property. They never even entered the house or went near anyone's cars, but they growled and they howled from every direction. More people got hurt running than anything, she said. Then Diane explained to me there were only 2 cars left there. Bob, the guy from the bank, and mine. And no one had seen Bob anywhere. 48 hours later, Bob was found, wandering on the back 10 acres of the property. He was severely dehydrated and delirious, according to Diane. He claimed that the wolves dragged him away to that area and wouldn't let him leave. 2 days after Bob was found, that property was donated to a nonprofit associated with the Navajo Nation. I lost out on $175,000. Truthfully, I don't give it. I'm just glad that it's settled. Bob offered me another listing, a ranch closer to the border. I politely told him he could kiss my I'm in full retirement. And if I want to sell real estate, I'm moving back to California.